The heat that summer in Harlem was not merely a matter of temperature, it was a physical weight, a living thing that pressed down on the rooftops of the tenements and curled around the lampposts like a serpent. It was August 1964, and the air smelled of ozone, exhaust fumes, and unlit gunpowder. The city was a powder keg, and there were men in high offices downtown who were desperately searching for a match. The newspapers, particularly the scandal-hungry tabloids like the Daily Graphic, had been running headlines all week screaming about the Harlem jungle, painting the neighborhood as a lawless pit of violence waiting to explode. They needed a riot. A riot justified budgets. A riot justified brute force. A riot sold papers. But Harlem had been quiet, a tense, disciplined quiet that frustrated the powers that be. So they decided to stop waiting for the fire and start it themselves. The target was chosen with cruel precision. St. Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church on 110th Street. It wasn't the biggest church, but it was the heart of the block, a place where the choir sang the blues away on Sunday mornings and where the elders organized food drives on Tuesday nights. At 2 a.m. on a Friday, under the cover of a darkness that the police patrol cars conveniently ignored, a group of men, hired thugs from Hell's Kitchen, paid in cash by intermediaries who answered to corrupt precinct captains, descended on St. Bethel. They didn't just vandalism it, they violated it. They smashed the stained glass windows that depicted the Black Christ. They overturned the pews, and on the white clapboard siding of the entrance, they spray-painted slurs so vile, so hateful, that they burned the eyes of anyone who read them. Then they left, leaving the doors wide open for the morning sun to reveal the wound. By 8 a.m., the news had spread faster than a virus. By 9 a.m., the street in front of St. Bethel was a sea of bodies. But this wasn't a congregation coming to pray. It was an army coming to war. Young men, their muscles tense with a lifetime of swallowed indignities, filled the intersection. They carried baseball bats, tire irons, and lengths of chain. Their eyes were wet with tears of rage, but their jaws were set in stone. Leading them was a young firebrand named Tyrell, a 20-year-old with a scar over his eye and a heart full of napalm. Tyrell was shouting, rallying the troops, pointing toward the police precinct 3 blocks away. "They did this!" Tyrell screamed, his voice cracking. "They spit in God's house. If they want a war, let's give them a war. Burn it down. Burn it all down." Across the street, parked in an unmarked sedan, sat Detective Sergeant Miller and a photographer from the Graphic. Miller was smiling. He picked up his radio. "Dispatch, we have a code 1013 forming on a 132nd. Send the riot squad. Send the wagons. We're going to fill the jails today." The photographer was checking his flash, eager for the shot of a black youth throwing a brick. The money shot that would be on the front page tomorrow with the caption, "Savages." It was a trap. A perfect, psychological mousetrap designed to snap the neck of the community's dignity. The stage was set. The actors were in place. The script called for blood, but the scriptwriter hadn't consulted the director. Just as Tyrell raised a crowbar high above his head to lead the charge, a low, black Lincoln Continental rolled into the intersection. It didn't honk. It simply nudged its way through the crowd with the slow, inevitable momentum of a glacier. The crowd parted. They knew that car. The Lincoln stopped between the mob and the road leading to the police station. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. He was dressed immaculately in a dark blue suit, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie. In the midst of the sweating, screaming, chaotic mass, he looked like he was on his way to a board meeting. He walked to the center of the street, standing directly in Tyrell's path. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his hands. He just stood there, lighting a cigarette with a gold lighter, the metallic clink audible in the sudden hush that fell over the front rows of the mob. "Move, Bumpy," Tyrell said, his voice trembling with adrenaline. "This ain't business. This is personal. Look what they did." He pointed at the defiled church. "We gotta settle the score." Bumpy took a drag of his cigarette and exhaled a long, thin plume of smoke. He looked at the church, then at the police cars gathering at the end of the block, then finally at Tyrell. "You're right, Tyrell," Bumpy said, his voice calm, conversational. "They did a terrible thing, and right now, there is a man named Miller sitting in a car over there, praying to a God he doesn't believe in that you throw that crowbar." "Let him pray," Tyrell shouted, and the crowd roared in agreement. "We'll give him something to pray about." "You're a boxer, aren't you, Tyrell?" Bumpy asked, ignoring the outburst. Tyrell blinked, confused by the non sequitur. "What? Yeah, golden gloves." "Then you know about the phantom bell," Bumpy said. He stepped closer, entering Tyrell's personal space. "In the ring, a dirty fighter will sometimes have a cornerman stomp on the floor to make a sound like the bell. Or they'll drop their guard, invite you in. It's a fake signal. They want you to drop your hands. They want you to think the round is over, or that you see an opening. And the moment you react to that fake bell, the moment you lose your discipline and swing wild, that's when they knock you out." Bumpy turned to address the crowd, his voice projecting without shouting, commanding the attention of hundreds. "Look at the corner. Look at the rooftops. You see the cameras? You see the riot gear? They have set the table for a feast, and you are serving yourselves up as the main course. They didn't deface that church because they hate God. They defaced it because they need a picture of you acting like animals. They want you to throw that brick so they can lock you in a cage and say, 'See? We told you they were violent. We told you they didn't deserve rights.' So what do we do?" someone shouted from the back. "Just take it? Let them walk all over us?" "No," Bumpy said sharply. "We fight. But a grandmaster doesn't fight the way a drunk does. A drunk throws a punch and breaks his hand on the wall. A grandmaster changes the board." Bumpy pointed at the church. "They want to show the world that Harlem is a place of destruction. So, we are going to make them show the world something else. Tyrell, put down the crowbar." Tyrell hesitated, his knuckles white. "Put it down," Bumpy ordered, his eyes flashing with that legendary cold fire. Tyrell dropped the iron bar. It clattered loudly on the asphalt. "Now," Bumpy said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a thick roll of cash. He tossed it to one of his lieutenants, a man named Whispers. "Go to the hardware store on 125th. Buy every can of white paint they have. Buy brushes. Buy turpentine. Buy glass. Bring ladders." He turned back to the crowd. "They broke it in the dark. We will fix it in the light. We aren't going to riot. We are going to work. We are going to make this church more beautiful by sunrise than it was yesterday. And we are going to do it while they watch." The tension in the air shifted. The thirst for blood was replaced by a confusion that slowly morphed into a different kind of resolve. It wasn't the hot, reckless energy of violence. It was the cold, hard steel of determination. The men put down their bats and picked up brooms. They traded chains for scrapers. Within an hour, St. Bethel wasn't a crime scene. It was a construction site. Bumpy organized them like a general. He put the old men on the logistics, bringing water and sandwiches. He put the young, strong men on the heavy lifting, removing the broken pews and sweeping the debris. He put the steady hands on the painting detail, and he made them wear their Sunday best. "Go home," he told them. "Put on a tie. Put on a clean shirt. If we are going to labor for the Lord, we will look like gentlemen." By midnight, the scene was surreal. The police had set up floodlights, expecting to illuminate a brawl. Instead, the harsh white light fell upon 300 black men, dressed in slacks and button-down shirts, silently scraping graffiti off the walls of a church. There was no shouting, no cursing, just the rhythmic swish-swish of brushes and the scraping of wire against wood. It was a symphony of discipline. Detective Miller stood by his car, his mouth agape. The riot squad was standing around, batons limp in their hands, looking foolish. There was no one to hit. There was no unlawful assembly to disperse. This was technically a volunteer community improvement project on private property. The tabloid photographer was pacing back and forth, frustrated. He aimed his camera, but every shot he framed was wrong. He wanted savages. He got saints. He wanted chaos. He got unity. At 3:00 a.m., the graffiti was gone. The walls shone with a fresh, pristine coat of white paint that gleamed under the streetlights. The broken windows had been temporarily boarded up with neat, clean plywood, painted to match the frame. The pews were upright and polished. Bumpy stood on the sidewalk, watching the work. He hadn't lifted a brush himself. Kings don't lay bricks. They lay the vision. But his presence was the mortar that held the operation together. Tyrrell walked up to him, his shirt covered in paint, sweat dripping from his nose. The rage was gone from his eyes, replaced by a strange, exhausted pride. "It looks good, Bumpy," Tyrrell said. "It looks better than good," Bumpy corrected. "It looks like dignity." Then Bumpy saw the reporter from the Daily Graphic trying to sneak away. "Hey!" Bumpy called out. The reporter froze. Bumpy walked over, gesturing to the gleaming church and the army of silent, dignified men standing before it. "You came here for a story," Bumpy said. "Don't leave without it. Take the picture." The reporter looked at Miller, who turned away in disgust, then looked back at Bumpy. He raised his camera. Flash. He took another. Flash. He captured the image of Tyrrell, standing tall with a paint roller like a scepter. He captured the image of the elders serving coffee to the workers. He captured the image of a community that refused to be broken. The next morning, the headline in the Daily Graphic was not the one Miller had paid for. There was no riot in Harlem. Instead, buried on page 4, but undeniable, was a photograph of the restoration with the caption, "Harlem residents restore vandalized church in night of vigil." They couldn't spin it. The visual evidence of their dignity was too overwhelming. The fake bell had rung, but the fighter hadn't flinched. That evening, Bumpy sat in his office at the back of the Blue Note. Tyrrell was there, sitting opposite him, looking at his hands which were still speckled with white paint. "We didn't get them back, though," Tyrrell muttered. "The guys who did it, they got away." Bumpy poured 2 glasses of cognac. He slid one to the young man. "Did they?" Bumpy asked. "Think about it, Tyrrell. Their goal was to make us look like animals so they could justify treating us like animals. Instead, we made them look like incompetent vandals, and we looked like the protectors of civilization. We didn't just beat them, kid. We humiliated them, and we did it without giving them a single drop of our blood." Bumpy leaned back, swirling the amber liquid. "In this life, you will hear many fake bells. People will spit on you, lie about you, try to drag you into the mud with them. They want you in the mud because in the mud, you look just like them. But you must be the fighter who waits. You wait for the real opening. And the real opening isn't their face, it's their mind. Yesterday, you wanted to break their bones. Today, you broke their narrative. That, my son, is a knockout." The lesson of St. Bethel became a cornerstone of the Bumpy Johnson mythos. It wasn't just about being tough. Any thug with a gun could be tough. It was about being smart. It was about emotional intelligence before there was a term for it. It was the understanding that when you're a black man in America, your anger is a weapon that is often turned against you, but your dignity is a shield that no amount of police brutality can crack. Bumpy taught Harlem that the ultimate rebellion against a system that wants to see you fail is to succeed, spectacularly and undeniably, right in their faces. Years later, when the riots of the late 60s eventually did tear through other cities, the blocks under Bumpy's control often remained islands of relative calm. Not because he ruled with an iron fist, though he did, but because he had instilled a deeper discipline. He had taught them the difference between reacting and responding. He had taught them that a king does not howl at the dogs barking at the gate. He simply reinforces the gate and lets the dogs exhaust themselves. The church still stands today, and if you scrape away enough layers of paint on the siding near the entrance, you might find a microscopic trace of the white lead paint from 1964, a hidden layer of history that serves as a reminder. The loudest noise isn't the explosion of a bomb, but the unified silence of men who know their own worth. The fake bell rang, but Harlem didn't blink. That was the night the thugs became the architects, and the gangster became the guardian. And in the chess game of the streets, that move was worth more than 1,000 pawns. It was the move of a king who knew that sometimes the most powerful fist is the one you never throw.